I'm 78 years old. I've been serving in the church since I was 10, deacon, elder, youth leader, Sunday school teacher for 31 years. And I need to tell you something that might surprise you coming from someone like me. For most of those 6 decades, I missed the point entirely. I'm not saying I didn't believe. I did. I'm not saying I didn't try. I tried harder than most. But somewhere along the way, I got so busy doing things for God that I forgot to actually know Him. It took me until I was 70 to finally see what I'd been blind to my whole life. These are the things I missed. Don't make my mistakes. The first thing I missed, I confused activity for intimacy. For 40 years, I was the busiest man in our congregation. If there was a committee, I was on it. If there was a project, I was leading it. I showed up early, stayed late, volunteered for everything. And I thought that meant I was close to God. I really did. But here's what I didn't understand. You can serve someone your whole life and never actually know them. I remember back in 1982, my pastor at the time, a man named Reverend Mitchell, pulled me aside after a building committee meeting. He said, "Leonard, when's the last time you just sat with the Lord? Not praying for things, not reading to prepare a lesson, just sitting." I laughed it off. I said I didn't have time for that. There was too much work to do. He looked at me with these sad eyes and said, "Son, Martha was busy too, but Mary chose the better part." I didn't listen. I thought he was being impractical. There were real needs, real problems, real people counting on me. I couldn't just sit around being quiet. Besides, I told myself my work was my worship. That's what I believed for decades. It wasn't until my wife Eleanor had her stroke in 2016 that I finally understood. She was in the hospital for 11 days. I sat in that room hour after hour with nothing to do but be still. No committees, no meetings, no tasks, just silence. Just me and my thoughts and the beeping of machines. And for the first time in maybe 50 years, I actually heard God. Not audibly, but in that deep place you can only hear when you stop all the noise. And what I heard broke me. He wasn't disappointed in my work. He was lonely for me. All those years, He just wanted me. Not my productivity, not my committees, not my perfectly organized outreach programs. Me. I wept in that hospital room, not just for Eleanor, but for all the years I'd wasted being busy instead of being present. Don't confuse being busy for God with being close to God. They're not the same thing, not even close. The second thing I missed, I neglected my family while serving everyone else. This one hurts to say out loud, but I have to say it because maybe it'll save someone else from my regret. I have 3 children, David, Rebecca, and Thomas. And for most of their childhoods, the church got the best of me. My family got the leftovers, the tired version of me, the distracted version, the one who was already thinking about next Sunday's lesson while sitting at the dinner table. I missed David's championship baseball game in 1974 because there was a deacons meeting. I told myself it couldn't be helped. The church needed me. I missed Rebecca's school play because I was counseling a couple from the congregation whose marriage was struggling. I told myself I was doing God's work. I missed Thomas's 16th birthday dinner because I was setting up for a church event. I told myself he'd understand. He was a good kid. He'd get over it. He didn't understand. None of them did. There was this one evening, must have been 1979, when Thomas came into my study. He was maybe 8 years old. He asked if I could come outside and throw the ball with him. I was preparing a sermon. I told him maybe later. He stood there for a moment, then quietly walked away. I didn't think much of it at the time. There would be other evenings, other chances. But those chances add up. Or rather, they subtract. One missed meant at a time until suddenly your children are grown and you realize you were never really there. When Rebecca was in her 30s, she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Dad, growing up, I always felt like the church was your real family. We were just the people you came home to when they didn't need you anymore." I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend myself. But she was right. And hearing it from her, hearing the hurt in her voice after all those years, was one of the most painful moments of my life. I'd been so focused on being a good servant that I'd been a mediocre father. And you can't get those years back. You can't redo your daughter's childhood. You can't make your son feel important when he's 43 and the damage is already done. The people in your church will find another volunteer. Your children will never find another father. The third thing I missed, I cared more about looking righteous than being righteous. This is the one I'm most ashamed of. For years, I had an image to maintain. Leonard the faithful, Leonard the dedicated, Leonard who never missed a service, never said a harsh word in public, never let anyone see him struggle. I worked so hard to look like a good Christian that I forgot to actually be one. Behind closed doors, I was irritable with my wife. I was impatient with my kids. I held grudges against people who had wronged me, even while I preached about forgiveness from the front of the room. I'd teach a lesson on Sunday about turning the other cheek, then come home and give Eleanor the silent treatment because of some petty disagreement. There was a man in our church named Walter. We had a falling out in 1991 over something so small I can barely remember what it was now. Something about how the missions budget should be allocated. He thought we should focus on local outreach. I thought we should support overseas missionaries. It got heated. Words were said. We stopped speaking. For 12 years, we sat in the same sanctuary, served on the same committees, and acted like the other person didn't exist. We'd nod politely if we passed in the hallway, but that was it. 12 years of coldness, 12 years of stubborn pride, and the whole time I was teaching Sunday school lessons about loving your neighbor. The hypocrisy of it makes me sick now. I finally went to Walter in 2003. I was 65 years old. I knocked on his door on a Saturday morning. He opened it, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Then I said, "I'm sorry. I've been a fool." He started crying. I started crying. We stood in his doorway like two old fools, weeping and hugging and asking forgiveness. He died 4 years later. I'm so grateful I didn't wait any longer. But I'm haunted by how much time we wasted. The world doesn't need more people who look holy. It needs people who are honest about their brokenness and actually working on it. I wish I'd learned that sooner. The fourth thing I missed, I made faith complicated when it was meant to be simple. Somewhere along the way, I turned knowing God into an intellectual exercise. I read commentaries, I debated theology. I could tell you the difference between premillennialism and amillennialism, explain the nuances of covenant theology, argue about predestination for hours. I had opinions about everything and certainty about most of it. But I couldn't tell you the last time I'd simply trusted God like a child trusts a parent. I'd turned faith into something you study rather than something you live. My granddaughter Lily taught me this. She was 6 years old, and she was staying with us for a weekend back in 2019. Before bed, she wanted to pray, so she folded her little hands, closed her eyes tight, and said, "God, thank you for Grandma and Grandpa. Please help my fish not to die. I love you. Amen." That was it. No fancy words, no theological precision, no hedging or qualifying, just a little girl talking to someone she believed was listening, someone she trusted completely. I sat there on the edge of her bed, and I felt something shift inside me. I'd spent 60 years making this complicated, reading books about prayer instead of praying, studying about God instead of talking to Him, overthinking every doubt instead of just bringing it to Him honestly. Lily didn't worry about whether her prayer was theologically correct. She just talked to her Father, and I realized I'd forgotten how to do that. Faith isn't an exam you have to pass. It's a relationship you have to show up for. A child understands this better than most theologians, better than I did for most of my life. The fifth thing I missed, I forgot that people matter more than programs. I was so good at organizing events, fundraisers, outreach programs, building campaigns, vacation Bible school. I could run a committee meeting like nobody's business. I had spreadsheets and timelines and volunteer schedules. Everything was efficient. But I was terrible at just being present with people, really present, without an agenda or a task list. There was a woman in our congregation named Margaret. Her husband Frank died suddenly in 2008. Heart attack, just like that, gone before the ambulance arrived. I remember going to the funeral, saying the right words, making sure the church provided meals for a few weeks. I organized the whole thing beautifully. I checked all the boxes. But I never just sat with her. I never asked her how she was really doing 6 months later, a year later, when everyone else had moved on with their lives. I was already focused on the next program, the next project, the next thing on my list. Years later, Margaret told Eleanor that the loneliest time of her life was after the casseroles stopped coming. The first few weeks, people surrounded her. Then gradually, they disappeared. And she was left alone with her grief, wondering if anyone actually cared or if she was just another item on someone's ministry checklist. That was me. I was the checklist guy, and I failed her. Jesus didn't start programs. He sat with people, he ate with them, he listened to their stories, he wept with them at gravesides, he touched lepers when everyone else looked away. And I missed that for so long because I was too busy being efficient. People don't need your programs, they need your presence. I'm 78 now. Eleanor recovered from her stroke, thank God. We have good days together, slower days. I stepped back from most of my church responsibilities a few years ago, not because service is bad, but because I finally understand that service was never the point. The point is love, loving God, loving people. Everything else is just details. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, I'd tell him to slow down. Stop trying to earn something that's already been given to you. Go to your son's birthday party. Sit in the quiet and let God find you there. Apologize to Walter today, not in 12 years. Hold your wife's hand more often. Read your Bible less like a textbook and more like a letter from someone who loves you. And remember, always remember that at the end of your life, nobody's going to care how many committees you chaired or how many events you organized. They're going to remember how you made them feel, whether you were really there, whether you saw them. I don't have many years left, maybe 10 if I'm blessed, maybe less. But these last 8 years, since I finally woke up, have been the richest of my life. Not because I stopped serving, because I finally understand why we serve in the first place. Don't spend 40 years learning what I could have understood at 30. The things that matter are simple, and they're right in front of you. If this meant something to you, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me what you're learning in your own journey. I'd love to hear it. The years go faster than you think. Make sure you're spending them on what actually matters.